When I walked into the courtroom, my daughter smirked, and my son-in-law just shook his head with open contempt. I was wearing my simple country clothes, worn-out boots, and held an old hat in my hands. I looked like a lost farmer, a confused old man who did not understand where he was. I saw Victoria whisper something to Preston, and he smiled with that arrogance that had always defined him. I heard her choked laugh, a sound that cut through my chest like a knife. To them, I was an embarrassment, an inconvenience, a silly old fool who had no business being there. But then the judge looked up. His eyes met mine. I watched as the color drained from his face as his hand trembled on the wooden gavel. His lips moved and he whispered something that silenced the entire courtroom. "My God," he said, "is it really him?" Everyone turned to look at me. The silence became so thick I could hear my own heart pounding in my ears. Victoria stopped smiling. Preston frowned, confused, staring at the judge as if he had lost his mind. They had no idea who I truly was. Not until that moment. My name is Harrison Caldwell. I am 70 years old, and somehow still healing from wounds my family inflicted. As a retired man living a quiet life, I thought I had escaped the deceit of the world, but maintained a close bond with my only child. If you are connecting with my story, please hit the like button to bring a little sunshine to this father's heart. Subscribe to the channel so you do not miss my next life stories, and tell me in the comments where you are watching this video from and what time it is there right now. It makes me really happy to know which corner of the country or the world is listening to me. It all started 3 months ago on what was supposed to be a peaceful Thursday afternoon at my secluded farm just outside of Richmond, Virginia. Since my beautiful wife Diane passed away 2 years ago, this farm had been my entire world. It was a quiet sanctuary away from the noise of the city, a place where I could tend to my garden, feed the chickens, and sit on the porch, remembering the good decades Diane and I had shared. I had gladly handed over the complex financial chores to my son-in-law, Preston. He was a sharp, fast-talking venture capitalist who married my daughter Victoria 10 years ago. I trusted them. They were my blood, my family. That afternoon, I walked down the long dirt driveway to check the mailbox. Among the grocery store flyers and seed catalogs, there was a thick envelope with a bright red, urgent stamp on the front. It was from the county tax assessor. I tore it open, expecting it to be a routine receipt. Instead, the bold black letters at the top of the page made the breath catch in my throat. Final notice of default. Property tax delinquency. Imminent foreclosure warning. I stood there in the driveway, the autumn wind suddenly feeling like ice against my skin. I read the document 3 times. It stated that my property taxes were 90 days past due, and if the balance was not settled by the end of the month, the county would begin proceedings to seize the farm. My farm. The home where Diane and I had planned to spend our final days. This made absolutely no sense. Exactly 1 month prior, I had transferred $35,000 directly into Preston's account, specifically to cover these property taxes. He had assured me over a family dinner that everything was taken care of, that I should not stress my retired mind with paperwork and wire transfers. I immediately pulled out my phone and dialed Victoria's number. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from a sudden sharp spike of adrenaline. She answered on the 4th ring, her voice carrying the background noise of a busy upscale restaurant. "Hello, Dad. I'm in the middle of a lunch meeting. Can I call you back?" "Victoria, I need to know why I just received a foreclosure warning from the county tax assessor," I said, keeping my voice as level as possible. "I gave Preston the money for the taxes 4 weeks ago. What is going on?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. The background noise seemed to muffle. "Dad, calm down," she said, her tone dripping with that patronizing sweetness you use to soothe a panicked child. "Preston handled that. You probably just got a delayed automated letter. Do not worry about it. We will come over tonight and sort it out. Just rest." They arrived at the farm just after sunset. The headlights of Preston's sleek black luxury sedan swept across the front porch where I was waiting. Preston stepped out first wearing an expensive tailored suit, looking entirely unbothered. Victoria followed, clutching a designer handbag, her face set in an expression of exhausted patience. I invited them into the living room and placed the final default notice on the coffee table. "Explain this to me, Preston," I said, pointing at the bold red ink. Preston did not even pick up the paper. He simply sighed, unbuttoned his suit jacket, and sat back on my sofa with an arrogant ease. "Harrison, you are getting worked up over nothing," he said smoothly. "I paid the taxes weeks ago. The county administration is notoriously slow at updating their mailing lists. You know how these government bureaucracies operate. But this letter was printed 3 days ago," I countered, tapping the date at the top of the page. "It explicitly says no payment has been received. If you paid it, show me the bank confirmation receipt right now." Preston exchanged a quick, exasperated look with Victoria. It was a look that screamed, "Here we go again with the crazy old man." "Dad, stop interrogating him," Victoria snapped, stepping forward and placing a perfectly manicured hand on Preston's shoulder. "He is doing you a favor by managing your accounts. You have been forgetting everything lately. You are confused." "I am not confused, Victoria. I am reading a legal document." "You are confused, Dad," she insisted, raising her voice just enough to dominate the room. Her eyes locked onto mine, unyielding and cold. "Do you not realize how bad your memory has gotten? Last week you forgot the name of my new dog. 2 days ago you called me asking what day it was. And yesterday—" She paused, letting out a dramatic, trembling breath. "Yesterday we stopped by while you were napping, and the gas stove was left on. The whole kitchen smelled like a leak. You could have blown up the entire house and died, Dad. We had to turn it off and open all the windows." The room went dead silent. The only sound was the ticking of the old grandfather clock in the hallway. I stared at my daughter, feeling the ground beneath my boots turn to ash. The gas stove. For a fraction of a second, my mind played tricks on me. I imagined the smell of gas. I remembered the warmth of that kitchen. Diane used to stand at that exact stove humming to old jazz records while she simmered her famous Sunday pot roasts. The aroma of garlic and rosemary used to fill these walls, making this empty house feel like a home. But when Diane lost her battle with sickness 2 years ago, the music stopped. The cooking stopped. I looked toward the kitchen archway. I had not turned on that gas stove in exactly 2 years. I lived exclusively on cold sandwiches, microwave meals, and coffee from an electric maker. I had even shut off the main gas valve behind the appliance months ago because I had no use for it. It was physically impossible for me to have left the stove on yesterday. A terrifying, icy realization washed over me. I was not losing my mind. My daughter was deliberately lying to my face. Why? Why would she make up a story about me almost blowing up the house? Why would Preston look so completely calm about a missing $35,000? I looked at their faces again. Victoria was performing the role of a highly concerned, stressed-out daughter flawlessly. Preston was playing the patient, misunderstood son-in-law. If I were just a regular grieving old farmer, I would have broken down right then and there. I would have apologized for my declining memory. I would have surrendered my independence to them. But they had forgotten one crucial detail about my past. Before I moved to this farm, before I became the quiet old man who tended to chickens, I spent 30 years as a federal prosecutor. I had stared into the eyes of the most ruthless, manipulative white-collar criminals in the country. I knew exactly what a lie looked like. I knew the subtle micro-expressions of a sociopath cornered in a lie. I was seeing those exact same expressions right now on the faces of my own family. My gut screamed at me to throw them out, to demand my money back, to rip the truth out of them. But my old prosecutor instincts kicked in cold and calculating. If I confronted them now without solid proof, they would escalate their narrative. They would use my anger as further proof of my supposed mental instability. To win this war, I had to play their game. I had to let them believe they had won the battle. I let my shoulders slump. I forced my hands to shake a little more visibly. I looked down at the floor, imitating the posture of a defeated, confused senior citizen. I left the stove on, murmured, letting my voice crack with manufactured vulnerability. Yes, Dad, Victoria said, her voice instantly softening into that fake, sugary tone. It terrified us. You are getting older. The grief is catching up to you. You cannot handle all this stress anymore. I slowly nodded, keeping my eyes averted so she could not see the absolute rage burning behind them. You might be right, I whispered. I am just so tired. Preston stood up, buttoning his jacket with a satisfied smirk. Do not worry about the tax notice, Harrison. I will call the county assessor on Monday and clear up their clerical error. You just focus on resting. We will take care of everything. As they walked out the front door, leaving me alone in the quiet farmhouse, I stood by the window and watched their luxury car disappear down the dark road. My sadness evaporated, replaced by a cold, hardened resolve. They thought I was a clueless old man waiting to die. They thought they could steal my money and gaslight me into an asylum. But they had just woken up a sleeping lion. The hunt had officially begun. The morning after their visit, Victoria showed up at the farm before the sun had crested the horizon. She walked into my kitchen holding a small, unmarked amber prescription bottle. She set it on the granite counter next to my coffee maker, with a soft, patronizing smile. Dad, I spoke with Dr. Aris this morning, she said, pouring me a cup of coffee. He agrees with Preston and me. The grief, the isolation is taking a toll on your cognitive functions. He prescribed these vitamins to help support your memory and keep you sharp. I stared at the little amber bottle. It looked innocent enough. Just a plastic cylinder filled with small white capsules. But a voice in the back of my head, a very old, very cynical voice that had interrogated mob bosses and embezzlers, whispered to me, do not take them. I knew I should listen to that sharp instinct. It had kept me alive in courtrooms for decades without fail. But she was my daughter. She was the little girl I had taught to ride a bicycle, the teenager I had proudly sent off to college, the woman I had walked to marry Preston. How could I let my paranoid prosecutor brain accuse my own flesh and blood of foul play over a forgotten gas stove? I convinced myself that the stress of the foreclosure notice was making me jumpy. I needed to trust my family. So I unscrewed the cap, took out a pill, and swallowed it with my coffee. Victoria beamed, kissing me on the cheek before grabbing her coat and leaving for the city. She told me she would text me every morning to make sure I took my medicine. And for the sake of family peace, I did exactly what I was told. Within exactly 2 long weeks, my entire physical reality began to warp into a nightmare. It started as a subtle heaviness behind my eyes, a dark, persistent, muddy fog that seemed to settle heavily over my brain by mid-morning. I used to wake up easily at 5 daily to tend to the vegetable garden and read the financial papers. By the end of the first week on the pills, I was struggling to drag myself out of bed before 10. My legs felt like they were filled with wet sand. Every step took an effort. I would sit on the edge of the mattress, gasping for air like a drowning man. Then came the tremors. I noticed it first while trying to sign a delivery receipt for some chicken feed. My hand shook so violently that the pen slipped from my fingers, clattering onto the porch. The delivery driver looked at me with a sense of deep, uncomfortable pity. It was the kind of look you give a dying animal. It made my stomach turn. By the second week, the mental fog had thickened into a solid wall. Thoughts would form in my head, sharp and clear, only to dissolve into white noise before I could articulate them. I found myself staring at the living room wall for hours, unable to remember what I was supposed to be doing. The brilliant legal mind that had spent decades outsmarting the most devious criminals in the country was being reduced to mush. I felt like a prisoner trapped inside a failing body. Every memory of Diane, every detail of our life together felt painfully distant and utterly unreachable. But despite the lethargy dragging me down, a singular thought kept piercing through the fog. The tax default notice. Preston had promised he would call the county and fix the error. He had sworn my $35,000 was exactly where it needed to be. but the paranoia had taken root. I needed to know for certain. I needed to look at my bank statements and trace the wire transfer myself. One afternoon, while the farmhouse was quiet, I sat down at the kitchen table and pulled my laptop toward me. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, shaking uncontrollably. I tried to type in the web address for my bank, but my blurry vision made the letters swim on the screen. It took me 3 attempts just to get to the login portal. The bright screen glared back at me, mocking my sudden incompetence. I wiped the sweat from my brow. I clicked on the username field. I typed it in. Then I moved to the password box. I stared at the blinking cursor. My mind went blank. I closed my eyes, rubbing my temples, trying to force my brain to work. I had used the same password for this account for 5 years. It was a combination of Diane's maiden name and our anniversary year, a simple sequence that was burned into my memory. But when I reached into the filing cabinet of my mind to retrieve it, the drawer was empty. There was nothing there, just a cloud of white noise. Panic began to bubble in my chest. My breathing turned shallow and rapid. I typed in what I thought was the password. Incorrect. I tried a variation. Perhaps I had capitalized the wrong letter. Incorrect. My hands were trembling so badly that I was hitting the wrong keys. I hit the enter button a 3rd time. A red warning box flashed on the screen. Your account has been temporarily locked due to multiple failed login attempts. Please contact customer service. I shoved the laptop away, my heart hammering against my ribs. I grabbed my cell phone from the table, my trembling thumbs fumbling over the screen to dial the bank's customer service line. The voice prompted me to enter my account number. I pulled my debit card from my wallet and typed the 16 digits. Then came the prompt. Please enter your 4-digit telephone security PIN to speak with a representative. I froze. The phone pressed against my ear felt like a block of ice. 4 digits. Just 4 numbers. I knew this PIN. I knew it like I knew my own name. But as I stood there in my kitchen staring at the wall, the numbers refused to materialize. The drugs coursing through my bloodstream had built a dam between me and my own memories. Please enter your 4-digit telephone security PIN, the voice repeated. Come on, Harrison, I muttered, my voice hoarse. Think. Just think. I punched in a sequence. The year I became a federal prosecutor. I waited, holding my breath. I am sorry. That PIN is incorrect. You have 2 attempts remaining. A cold sweat broke out across my forehead. The room started to spin slightly. The lethargy from the morning pill was pulling me down, begging me to go back to bed and forget about it. But the terror of losing control kept me anchored to the floor. I typed in another set of numbers. Diane's birth month and day. I am sorry, that PIN is incorrect. You have 1 attempt remaining before your account is frozen for your protection. I lowered the phone from my ear. My chest heaved as I struggled to draw in air. I looked down at my shaking hands. They belonged to an old man. They did not look like the hands that had once slammed legal briefs onto mahogany tables demanding justice. They looked weak. I felt weak. I hit the end call button and let the phone drop onto the table. The silence of the farmhouse crashed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I sank into a chair, burying my face in my trembling hands. For the first time since Diane died, I felt completely terrified. I was locked out of my own finances. I had no way to verify if Preston had stolen my $35,000. I had no way to prove that the foreclosure notice was real. And worst of all, I was losing the only weapon I had left to fight back. My own mind. Victoria and Preston had insisted these pills would clear my head. They had looked me in the eye and promised they were helping me. But as I sat there shaking and confused, unable to remember a 4-digit number, a chilling realization sliced through the haze. They were not trying to cure me. They were trying to erase me. The next few days passed in a blur of agonizing clarity mixed with chemical exhaustion. I knew the pills they were giving me were poison, But I also knew that if I suddenly stopped taking them completely, Victoria and Preston would know I had figured out their game. I had to maintain the facade. I continued to take the pills when Victoria was watching, secretly spitting them into my palm and hiding them in my pockets. But enough of the drug was already in my system to keep my hands trembling and my mind wading through thick mud. They visited again on a Sunday morning, bringing an expensive box of pastries from downtown Richmond. Victoria breezed through the front door with her usual counterfeit cheerfulness, loudly asking how her favorite father was doing. Preston trailed behind her, checking his watch, radiating impatient obligation. I was